Good morning, everyone. If you are on the Michigan side of things, welcome everyone to the Artist Spotlight Stories, sponsored by the Center for Armenian Studies at the University of Michigan. My name is Melanie Tahmizian. I'm the director of the center. And the Artist Spotlight Story Series was inaugurated last year, and with the intention of giving Armenian artists, filmmakers in particular, a platform to showcase their work as cinemas and exhibition spaces closed their doors. And we're continuing this series, and it's recorded for people to watch as we saw a great interest in our audience in engaging with local and international artists, but also see, of course, this as a great contribution to our center's educational mission, which promises not only to engage interdisciplinary, but also strives to critically consider that concerns that lie at the nexus of the Armenian experience. And of course, it is really art that cuts to the heart, unfiltered, unapologetically, and uninhibited. Today, I have the great pleasure to introduce to you Daniel Tahmizian, a visual storyteller who calls Toronto, Canada, his home. And Daniel here now appears on the screen. He's been working for nearly 15 years in film and television, and he has worked across a number of genres and mediums, but focuses mostly on documentary, comedy. He is a very funny man, and music. And Daniel's short films have been screened around the world, including a very funny short film called Being Andy Serkis, which won the 2018 Canadian Comedy Award for Best Short Films. As a director of photography and camera operator, and he'll tell us more about his current project, he has been broadcast on stations like Vice TV, CBC, and also fashion television. So we had, as a community, the great pleasure of watching The Wanderer. The film is a modern silent short film that follows the title character played by Steve Bouloudi as he emerges from a lone tree into the vast rural landscape. A man really out of time and space, the wanderer moves through the world completely foreign to him and encounters different forms of consciousness, which is really beautiful to watch. And it's told in the style of multiple parables that speak to the nature of time and presence. The film is inspired, and we'll hear more about this, by the writings of William Blake and also Taoist literature. But ultimately, Dan asserts in his sort of description of the film that The Wanderer is a simple story about living in the moment. And could we use living in the moment at this particular juncture of our time? This film has been screened at the ARPA Film Festival in 2017 and also at the Pomegranate Film Festival in 2018. So for our audience, I may ask you to just put your your questions into the Q&A section. It's on the bottom of your screen. At any moment, you can interrupt us, and we will obviously try to address your questions. So welcome, Daniel, to our forum here. And I'm so thrilled to see you. I know you're taking time out of your workday in Canada to speak to us from a hotel room, I believe.
Yes, thank you so much for having me. I appreciate it.
So Daniel currently is in Thunder Bay, which is in the north of Canada, working on a new project. But I would like to actually just jump right in and by thinking about your film, The Wanderer, and looking at your profile, it became very clear to me that The Wanderer is quite different from what you usually do. And which for me begs the question of what inspired this film, and also, of course, as follow-up, what is it that William Blake and Taoist literature bring to your work, as you noted in your beautiful description of this film?
Sure, yeah, it's a big question. Yeah, it's definitely different than a lot of projects that I've worked on. I think this was like my most personal project. It definitely came at a time where um, I was making like a big life decision. At the time, I had been working in comedy, mostly in Toronto, like working on comedy films and comedy shorts with a lot of the local comedians, um, and or like making music videos, just kind of like it felt more like content based, and not so much expression. Not to take it away from I definitely enjoyed a lot of the projects I was working on, but so I was doing that as well as working like a job. And I kind of had this like point in my life where I was offered like this really great full-time position. It was at like a film festival in Toronto, and it felt like just like it was like this moment where I had to make this decision of like, am I gonna just go full-time into like the world of like supporting filmmakers and supportive film, or am I making films? Like it felt like this very pivotal moment. And so I decided to make this film in that moment and kind of like quit all my jobs and quit everything I was doing and focus on this project that I had been in my head for a long time. Like I definitely had been in my head for probably 2 years. And it was like finally maybe a few lines here and there on a notepad. But something that I always kind of go with like if something sticks in your brain, it's important. So it's like
Mhm.
2 years, if it's like I am consistently thinking about it and seeing it grow and change, then it's like something that it became something of a need to like get it out there. I was like, if I don't, it's just going to keep spinning in my head. I need to see this realized. And so, yeah, so that's kind of how like the film was born, out of this like moment. I feel like out of necessity of like proving to myself, like, okay, I need to like jump in, and if I want to be a filmmaker, then like I need to make my film. Because I feel like a lot of projects, it was a lot of collaboration, which I love, or working on other people's projects. It was like this was like the one where I felt like this is my voice, these are my words, even though there's no words in the film, but this is just kind of my expression. And yeah, so I think that's why it was so different. It just kind of came out of um, a free expression of myself, I guess, rather than like worrying about a lot of things. It's also at the time when I was making comedy shorts, everything was getting shorter. Like it was like with Instagram and all these things coming out, it was like all of a sudden people were like, let's make a 30-second thing, and I was like, like this is getting further away from what I wanted to do. So this was also a reaction to be like, make the longest short piece you can make. It's like 20, I think the film's 21 minutes or something, which is for a short film is like on the long end. So yeah.
Float between muting and unmuting myself. But tell us a little bit about the content. So you are saying this imagery, this wanderer floated in your head for 2 years. Tell us a little bit how he floated and about the persona itself. Where does this
Sure.
come from?
Yeah, so the original idea that was sparked was it's going to sound very far away from what the film is, but um, just in my like very rudimentary understanding of like quantum physics.
Oh, okay.
I just remember hearing this idea that, and again, I'm no scientist. This is just like sometimes when you absorb information, you just process it in the way that you process it. And I remember hearing about like quantum particles and how they seem to just disappear and come back, and like they seem to not abide by the rules of like time and space as we know. I don't know. Maybe that's a horrible bastardization of quantum mechanics, but that idea just struck me, that there are these particles that seem to like just disappear. Where do they go? And I thought that'd be an interesting character to approach. And so I was approaching it more along, maybe in like, I don't want to say sci-fi, but just like really exploring that idea of a character who can pop in and like, if that particle was like a character who had thoughts, emotions, and like what would that life be like, where you're just like untethered by these things. And so that was what the germ of the idea, and it grew and grew and grew, and it felt and then I was like, that would be a very interesting challenge to create a story where the character exists on a linear timeline as a film, but his world or their world pops in, and it was getting very convoluted and very abstract, and I was like, felt like I was losing the plot. So I decided to simplify the idea into what about the one, let's just explore the one moment of existence in this character's life. So it's like, rather than following them in and popping in and out of realities and
Yeah.
okay, let's just pick this one spot, at least in like a location sense, and then that grounded it into thinking more about, rather than the setting and everything, it was like, okay, well, how would this person live, how would this
Mm.
entity live, and like how would they react, encounter things in that world where they are so untethered by time and space. And so then it became a bit more grounded as like a character profile. And at the time I was reading like Taoist literature, like the Tao Te Ching and Chuang
Mhm.
writings, and it felt very like the idea felt very Taoist. And I love just like the idea, the way that their writings are these kind of like little stories, these very little parables that just pack like a moral punch, like really hard, these and very simple and to the point. It's
Mhm.
not, sometimes, I mean, it's a mixture. Like obviously there's some passages that I'm just like, it's the language and the beauty is a wash, and I don't quite know what I get out of it. And then there's some that just like hit me really, really hard. I have a couple written down just because I have terrible memory, but I remember one. I think it's from the Tao Te Ching that was, who doesn't talk, or who knows doesn't talk, who talks doesn't know. And
Mm.
I remember that speaking to me, and that was like the kind of the idea for making it a silent film, um, because it was just like this Taoist idea that simplicity, and I just wanted to express it without words. So that's where that was kind of there's little influences all along, and then um, there was one, I was reading William Blake, and there was one poem particularly that I felt like when I read that, it really kind of spoke to be the guidepost of the film, and it's called Eternity. It's he who binds himself to a joy does the winged life destroy. He who kisses the joy as it flies lives in eternity sunrise. And
Oh.
I felt like it hit me really deeply, and that was actually like I gave that poem to Steve Bollian, to the actor, as I was like, this should be kind of running through your head constantly as your character's kind of guy, like more internal mantra, let's say, maybe. Yeah, and so the idea, it just like and I was trying, as I was reading these Taoist texts, I'm kind of a person who tries to live, like it's like, okay, I'm reading all this philosophy, I'm gonna try and live in the same way and approach this project in the same way. And that's why I let the ideas, I like the, like how how you put it, the wanderer floating through my head, and I let the story and the way I created the film kind of flow in the same way, like be like water, just I let it
Mhm.
grow, even though it started off as almost like a sci-fi idea, it turned into like the furthest thing from it. Like it's
Yeah, I mean, while you're talking, this keeps sort of percolating in my mind, that the actual impetus of the film is so completely different of what it ends up being, right? And so if you're thinking about particles existing and and disappearing, and then what you created for us is this sort of moment in time. And then even thinking about the wanderer, right? Wandering is like there's a sort of movement that's not linear, but it's connected, right? It's not
yeah.
disconnected, which is so interesting that that it evolved into this sort of wondrous journey of in time, but one would not necessarily think about it as the way that you're describing it, how it started in your mind. It's a fantastic trajectory that I'm seeing here, which is really beautiful.
Yeah, it was a great exercise in just letting things be and letting things grow the way that they would, and not trying not
Yeah.
to overthink it. Like I definitely got into that place of like not overthink, like there was moments, where you can stop yourself and think like, where is this going, like where, and I just tried to let it evolve naturally as it did, and yeah, I'm happy.
Which is then also, of course, this expression. I mean, then the film itself becomes representative of this Tao philosophy, right, of flowing and being in the moment. So the production of the film then actually really becomes not only a representation but also an exercise of that philosophy. Which
Yeah, I think it's very important to live like what you're trying to get across as well. I think it was something I learned working in comedy. Like I always found if we're having like so much fun while making it, like if we're making ourselves laugh while we're making it, there's a magic that comes across. You can feel like how it's being made in the product, and
yeah.
yeah, and so it was just like I always felt like the process needs to like also represent like what you're getting across. And it can't just be this like separation of like, yeah, like how you're making it. It's like this rigid
Yeah.
structure, but you're creating this work that talks about being like, you know, going with the flow and everything. And they should be connected, I think.
Mhm. So I'm going to shift the discussion a little bit. So as you know, and we've talked about this a little bit, the center this year is focusing its energies to think about Armenian ecologies, and nature and the environment are big in what we're examining, and sort of the relation between humans and nature in this sort of symbiotic, but also then, of course, now very flawed way. And with this theme, sort of, we try to think about collapsing this distinction between natural history and human history in what we do at the center. So most of our visitors are historians and environmental scientists who are going to be talking about this. But viewing The Wanderer, of course, and I mean, intentionally, when I saw it, I was like, there's a lot of nature here, and there's a lot of human here. And these two interact in this really beautiful way. And so your film really spoke to me in thinking about contributing to this larger discussion of nature and human. And there was one scene that really stood out to me in this context, and that was the scene where the wanderer is imitating or trying to imitate the tree. Besides him, of course, falling out of a tree in the very beginning and being sort of born out of this beautiful tree standing in the middle of a field. But there's this other scene that I think is really neat. And Naira, I think we have that scene available. So maybe we can take a quick peek before you respond to my question. Thank you, Naira.
Yeah. I guess, yeah. Yeah, I think when it's interesting that you say that. I definitely didn't, um, I guess I wouldn't say like it was like forefront of my mind to be making a film, like you said, like with nature so involved. I think again that was part of just like the natural progression. I definitely, I mean, a big part of it was like when I was wanting to make this film, I thought I mean I'm like somebody who's very connected to nature. I love being outside, and I wanted, if I was going to make a film, I wanted to be out into like a natural landscape. When I think about like, okay, this is going to be a weekend of shooting, how would I want to spend that weekend? It would be like out in the woods. So it's like, why not set this film out in the woods? It also made sense, but yeah, I thought it made sense for this character who um, doesn't really, who does slip between time and space, and he's landed in this plane of existence. And so his concept, I mean, he's a human just in his form. Like I had to have an actor like portray this character, but I didn't want him to only interact with other humans. I wanted, because I don't think he would approach um, it the same way. I think he would see that like in a very Taoist way, like would see, like, know that all forms of consciousness have like a spirit, and would interact that way. And so yeah, I don't know, it just felt very like natural for him to have a conversation with a tree. I was also writing the film in outside mostly, and I was like in between apartments. I was staying at like a friend's place, and I was in his backyard, and I was like under this big beautiful tree the whole, and I remember just I wanted him to have interactions with consciousness that wasn't just human beings, and I just like there was just this big beautiful tree, and I was like, what would it be like if he was to have a conversation with the tree?
Mm-hmm.
And that was kind of, yeah, where it came from. And I think um, yeah, I mean, I think we've like definitely separated ourselves from nature in a way, like in the modern world, where it feels very like two separate worlds. With it's, I mean, even if you look back in history, that's not been the case. We've like tried to live with the world for the majority of like that humans have been around. And when you look at a lot of ancient cultures, like all of their stories and involve nature, and like that in Taoist literature there's a lot of like, in many of these stories, animals and the ocean will be a character in one of the stories, and there isn't the separation, because I think um yeah, there shouldn't be. We need to live with the world and not like opposed to it. I'm reading this book right now. It's actually very um it's called Braiding with Sweetgrass. It's
Ah,
by this,
yeah.
have you heard of it?
Yeah, I've heard of it. I haven't
Yeah,
read it, but I've
I,
seen it
I'm
around.
reading it
Yes.
right now. Like I'm only a little bit through, but it's by an ecologist, an indigenous or biologist, ecologist, and the book is about like her trying to reconnect the two. That she's like a scientist, but she's like a PhD in botany, I believe, and but she's also like was raised with indigenous worldviews and knowledge, and she thinks that the two worlds are too separate, and that there should be like that there's knowledge that both worlds can share with each other, and uh, and it comes from that perspective that like sometimes science can be very like it looks at plants and animals as like subjects in like their world, the science worldview is like, where it's instead of characters in the same story.
Hmm. Yeah, and that comes through, I think, really beautifully in the film, the sort of connection between the two. There's also that one moment that I always keep thinking about, that connects sort of the wanderer with the rootedness of the tree, because he's jumping up and down and he's trying to put his, at least that's how I'm looking at it. He's perhaps trying to put his feet into the ground, but it's not really working. And then he decides, okay, well, that's not working. I'm just going to flow with this tree. And it's this beautiful, small little brief second where I'm thinking, does the wanderer desire to be rooted, and feels like he doesn't have the possibility to do so, and then moves on into what he does best, which is exploring natural space and all its wonders, and sometimes with anxiety and sometimes with great joy, it seems like.
Yeah, no, like that's exactly what it is. Yeah, I felt like he like kind of like I'm always like in awe of these like massive, beautiful trees, the ones that just seem to tower over us, and
Yeah.
they just seem so like majestic, and they seem like these like gods.
Mhm.
And I guess it was like he almost had this like moment of jealousy of like, oh, here's this big, beautiful, incredible thing, but the tree like responds essentially saying, yes, that I am this grand thing, but like, but I'm stuck here. Like this is my world, and it's not your world. Like
Yeah.
you may be smaller than me, but you have mobility, and like, and it's like that each little spot of the film is supposed to just have like a little, like again, like a little parable where it's just like
Yeah.
about, yeah.
Well,
So
it worked because for me
yeah,
it really stood out in the whole film as like, do we desire to be rooted, or do we desire to be mobile as humans?
yeah. I
Um,
mean, that's something that I always struggle with. Like,
yeah,
yeah, like these days, like my work takes me traveling all over the world, like, and I love it, and it's amazing, but it comes with certain sacrifices about like yeah, stable, like rooted home life, and so it's like they both have their pros and cons. You just kind of have to follow
yeah,
your heart and follow like the way the world takes you. Yeah.
yeah. I think which sort of also speaks to your um, sort of insistence on time throughout the film, and time represents itself, I think, in interesting ways in the film, at points quite obvious
Yeah.
in this mechanical item of the clock, which is this sort of how, why is this here? We're, in the space of nature. Why is this mechanical item of the clock present in this wondrous journey? And I'm wondering, talk to us a little bit about, I mean, I think you've talked a little bit already about sort of the disconnect of time and this quantum physics ideas that sort of sparked your thinking about this film. But take it to the film, like, where's time represented, or where do you see time, and why this mechanical clock?
Yeah, so I think specifically in terms of the progression of the film, like the idea I had was for him to start in nature, so him to start born out of a tree, or
Yeah.
pop out of existence into a tree and wander the natural landscape, talk to a tree, and move about, and then slowly introduce like the human world, leading into his encounter with the people. And so I wanted some kind of object, like a mechanical object, just to be like that's, but also, but out like on its own just as this introduction to this world. And I thought like, and time is one of the most, it's such a human construction. Like it probably doesn't, the concept of time doesn't exist anywhere else in the universe, I imagine, unless there's a consciousness like human beings that we've created this. So it felt like the most obvious, like the most human mechanical object is like a clock, because and for the wanderer, it's the most foreign object I think he could encounter, because as a character who doesn't exist, like he doesn't have the concept of time at all. He just flows. I mean, he literally pops in and out of time. Even like there's moments in the film where even though we are following him linearly, time does kind of jump a little bit. And like later in the film we see like, yeah, and even it was unintentional, but I've heard people tell me, because there's three different trees that are like kind of focused, and they all look like they're in different stages of the seasons.
Ah,
And
yes.
that was unintentional, but I actually really like the idea that it's possible he's moving, that in every scene he's just moving through the same landscape at different
Mm,
slices of time. But specifically the time, and then so he encounters this mechanical clock, and he has no concept of human linear time, of just like, the ticking clock of time, and so it hypnotizes him. And it was, it is portrayed negatively, I think, in this circumstance, that it's like, as somebody who lives outside of time, I think you live like a very free and happy life, and as soon as you kind of focus on each second that's ticking away as like a moment in time vanishing or whatever.
Yeah.
I think it's hypnotic, and that's why you have no idea how long he starts looking at it, and then once the trance is kind of lost, then it's night. And I mean, that's the most stark example, easy like visually, but who knows how long he was there, like, and that's why he hides it, because I think he thinks it as like this, like, and even the score gets like dramatic and kind of demonic, and I think he wants to keep it away from the world because he sees it as like it basically like took him away from like his happy existence.
That's the way that you're explaining this is super interesting and really quite beautiful if we think about this mechanism of time that is ticking and presents for us, I think, in various stages of our life, also this anxiety and this threat and of how much time do we have on this planet? And so the linkage there is really neat. And the idea that you could bury it in a way then also links very nicely to this idea of an exploration of time and very nice. I really like how you conceptualize that. I want to ask you the audience to just chime in. It's a small group, and you can just offer your thoughts to us as we are just having a conversation here. And Daniel is obviously super open to talking about his film, and so please just chime in. So here's Helen. Okay, so I have more questions, but let's just think about let's just take Helen's question. Unrelated questions. Good. She says, I noticed that a couple of shots in the film, especially in the first half, feature a single tree in the landscape that is otherwise empty. I was wondering whether in your mind, this is a pattern of framing held any significance, especially as they are contrasted with the nameless man in a more abundant landscape. That is one. And then she says, like other romantic era poets, Blake's writing were more than just about the environment. Songs of innocence and of experience, for instance, are examples of commentary on society and humanity. Similarly, I think the film is more than just about the landscape. In this context, I'd like to hear if Blake's song or work beyond the poem you mentioned informed the production of The Wanderer. Thanks, Helen.
Sure, yeah, it's a lot. I guess the first, in regards to the first one, yeah, the image of a lone tree is like always spoken to me. I don't know why. Yeah, I just think it's such a beautiful image. Like when I grew up north of the city, like not in a super rural community, but kind of like in the middle ground, and I in like in cornfield, a lot of cornfields around, and I was just like when I remember driving down the road. And these like vast, maybe a cornfield, there'd just be this one lone tree sticking up in the landscape. And there's just something about it that always struck me as a very visual, I don't know. Yeah, I can't explain it, but I always knew like the opening shot would be of one of those trees. And I took a long time to find the right one that like would also fit the shot in the landscape and everything. Yeah, and so I think it was actually more, it was not thought out that there are so many trees and empty landscapes. That I don't remember that being. I know that first shot I wanted it to be that way. And then I think as we just explored the landscape we were shooting in, which is like an island, this beautiful island off of Kingston, Ontario in like the Thousand Islands region. And I kind of had like hundreds of acres at my disposal. It was a family friend's property. And we just kind of wandered the landscape ourselves and found beautiful places to shoot, and that just kind of naturally came out of it. So that wasn't a plan. I knew the first shot I wanted that to be a lone tree in a vast landscape, but the others were more of just happy accents. And like I said, I've had people tell me that they feel like it's the same landscape, just changed over time, which I really love. That was not an intention, but like, sure, I love that. I love that idea, and that fits. Yeah, I hope I answered that okay.
Yeah.
In terms of the second one, I have to say like that. I have read quite a bit of Blake back when I was writing this film, but not. I would specifically in regards to this film, that one poem was like that one spoke the most.
Mhm.
That was really the only one that I would say like directly informed. I mean, his writings have been there with me, but in terms of this film, that one spoke mostly to it. I haven't read him in a little bit, so I can't. My memory for these things are terrible. I always feel bad. Like passages that like I don't quite remember the wording, but I know they like seep into my consciousness, and I can never. I'm always jealous of people who can recite poetry by memory, and that yeah, I mean, his work is speaks to a lot of things, and it's in there. But that one poem specifically spoke to this film, just in terms of, and to me personally, I think about it all the time.
Mhm.
Um, I remember I did a lot of traveling in my younger years, and something that always stuck with me. I've had some of the most deep and engaging like conversations with people I met that day, and have never seen ever again. Like spend one night with that, just at a bar in the middle of the desert drinking, and I remember for when I first heard these, I thought I was sad that I would never see these people again. Like had these deep connections, but it's like so silly to be sad to lose something that you never had before. It's like just enjoy that moment is so special, and to hold on to it, and it would be like yeah, to let it go is to like actually like hold on to it more.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a really good answer. I have another question. As I'm looking at sort of the trajectory of the wanderer, um, as you know, from a lone tree into a more populated landscape of nature, into this sort of moment of meeting other humans in the forest. And that was sort of, for me, I was like, okay, this is a bit of a rupture, and I felt that for me it was completely unexpected. um, and he also enters, maybe like me, as I'm watching him, he's also entering into it quite cautiously, and is also shunted by the people on the scene. But he breaks that moment. He breaks sort of the marginalization of himself with one person, and he does this through this beautiful interaction. And we do have that scene, and I ask people to just chime in and in response to the scene as we are watching it. And Naira, if you can launch that, and then maybe Dan afterwards you can respond to my curiosity
Sure.
of people in the woods.
Yeah. I appreciate the question. It was, I think it always struck me I wanted him to interact um, with people. I thought that was in terms of like a progression of a story, just like kind of like on his own, and then um, how a character like that would approach like our world that we live in, I guess. Even though I didn't want it to be like a modern world, I wanted it to stay. It has like kind of that early 19th century or early 1900s like aesthetic. To me, that was just like a classic kind of time that just feels like it could. I just wanted this to feel like it could exist at any point in time. Into that just for what I think I just like the aesthetic, and I think put it into the modern world, I felt like would have been too. Um,
Jarring, maybe.
yeah, just like jarring, and I don't know. There'd be too many connections, like into like what's happening, like into a modern sense. So it's just, anyways. But yeah, so I just like I wanted to explore like how a character like that would interact with our society, like a human society. And so that was kind of like the idea. He does enter like very cautiously. I think I wanted to kind of put the idea across that like for whatever reason he just didn't want to. I think you could sense that these beings were almost like the clock, like they were like rooted in time, like and even though he could connect easily with the tree, I thought he wouldn't want to connect with humans. And the original idea in the script, which I want to be transparent on, is I wanted him to leave and not be able to not interact with them. So leave,
Ah,
move on, and just keep stumbling into the same group, and not have to make the decision made for him. Like this is a moment that you need to go through. It just I couldn't quite. That was my one failing on this project. Is that visually without where I couldn't. It didn't quite work. So I needed to shoot it in
mm,
a way where he had to make a decision to go back. It was just a hard scene to shoot to get that like idea across that he like
yeah.
kept moving forward and kept stumbling into the same place. So it was like the world kept bringing this situation in front of him. But what I ended up having to shoot was just like him deciding to go back, but like in a way didn't want to. And then um, yeah, and then I wanted like two kind of contrasting groups of people that at the beginning they just don't know who this person is, and he seems like a silly little child, and then but I wanted to make a connection with at least with one of the people, and so that's where this scene comes into play. Is um, he's sort of he's like an alchemist. I was always very struck by that the book The Alchemist,
Yeah.
and so I wanted to include like I felt like a character like that like him would possess some form of alchemy, and so
Mm.
um, that's where that scene comes in, and that's where you get to see him connect with this person because in his alchemy he can feel a connection with this woman, and so he wants to make her laugh, and that's like his way of connecting with somebody. And so he does his little thing of alchemy, and I always love the idea that love the idea that the what he got out of it, like most people see alchemy as like creating gold out of nothing, but for him the gold, somebody who's like not involved with this world, the gold is like a byproduct, like it's like the garbage left over,
Yeah.
and the treasure is like the sound that he can create in the canister.
Yeah.
um, so I kind of like, yeah, flipping that on its head, and that's where he really makes a connection because these other people, all they see they see the gold and they want the gold. He doesn't understand because this is like essentially to him this is the garbage, like this is like what's
Yeah.
left over from his magic, where she sees the magic that he's created and doesn't pay attention, and that's
And
where
the,
they
yeah.
get a connection. Yeah.
And the magic creating then laughter at that particular moment, right, which is this nice moment of human connection. It brings me to think about the score of the film, as you're saying, talking about the sound that he produces out of this moment of alchemy. But overall, the score of the film is also a very important part of
Yeah.
this journey, and it stands out at many moments when it goes from complete silence to various instrumental forms. So tell us a little bit about the score to the film and how you mapped it onto this journey.
Yeah, the score is like equally as important as the visuals, obviously, and I always knew that was going to be the case. That was I have a lot of work with a lot of musicians in many different ways, and I wanted, um, yeah, I wanted the score to be like such a huge part of the film, and just in terms of um, I, having it's making a silent film, like the score was going to have to kind of be the voice and the words of and the emotions of the piece, and I just love that process so much. Like I think it's so I tried to pack this film with as much as like the things that I love about filmmaking as well. So that was my selfish reason for that. But yeah, the score is composed by like Laura Barrett, who's an incredible musician, and she's and film composer in Toronto. And yeah, and we worked for it took quite a long, like it was a lot of work because it's like for 21-minute film, I think it's something like 17 minutes of score. No, it was all original composition, um, and it was a lot. Like we worked together on a lot of it. I mean, it's all her came out of her brain, but it was through a lot of like time spent discussing the film and how what each scene means.
Yeah.
We picked early on. We picked the instruments that we felt like were the voices of each character.
Mhm.
So the Wanderer is voiced by a clarinet, which I
Yeah.
thought it's just like such a beautiful expressive instrument. And then I loved the marimba, as I think it's just like I think it's an instrument that is like so well suited to film. So I knew I wanted that in there. And then yeah, each character needed kind of its own voice and its own instrument, and so that informed the score as well, because each instrument can only has so much range and everything. So that decision was made very early on in terms of
Yeah.
how it could be each instrument or each character could be voiced. And there was, I wanted, they call it like Mickey. I wanted a mixture of original music and a bit of I wanted it to be playful, and they call it Mickey Mousing. I know that's a term where it's like sometimes the score is like literally like the
Yeah.
footsteps or the beats or the whatever. Like I wanted a nice mixture of all that where it's a bit cartoony, it's a bit, and it has that old school sense where it is like pushing the action, and then also in times it's just a beautiful musical score that kind of conveys the like emotion of the scene. Um,
Mhm.
there is like a one central theme to it, like we call it like the Wanderer theme. Um, and that was written by a composer named Edwin Sheard, who was originally doing the composition and wasn't able to complete it. But there was like this one piece that I remember. I was like, can we please? This is like it captured the,
Mhm.
I think the essence of the pic of the whole the piece in general, and so that's the one piece that's repeated. Everything else is like a constant change, but there I think we hear it 3 or 4 different times in different tempos and different like um, yeah, voicings like different instruments, I even believe. But yeah, it was that was an incredible process, and so it was all scored on the computer, and then we brought it, and but then it's real instruments. Like that was
Right.
another thing. I was like, I wanted, I just like I just wanted to spend a day in a studio with real musicians, and I was in there the whole time to make sure, like, because some of the pieces it's very emotional, like
Mhm.
it's even though it's written on sheet music, I was like, I wanted to know. It's almost like it was like directing an actor a few times, just like in
Yeah.
terms of like how the clarinet player um, was playing the piece, and so yeah, so we had like a whole studio with like kind of like a garage studio with all the instruments. They're all real instruments and played by incredible musicians. So that
Yeah.
was like yeah, an amazing part of this whole process was going through all of that, and it really, I mean, it brings the film to like it gives it so much life that it didn't have
Yeah,
before.
it's the outcome is incredibly beautiful. I mean, there's these moments of the cello that comes through that
Yeah.
are just incredible. Um, okay, so I have to ask the question. The Wanderer, the title of the film. Armenians are wanderers, and you, as a diaspora Armenian, for me, it sort of struck a chord in thinking about your identity as an Armenian, the linkage to the film. How does your identity as a diaspora Armenian fit into your work, or does it? Is it something that you think about? Is it something that you considered in this particular film, or is it not? I mean, the answer can also
Yeah,
be no.
I mean, yeah, I'd say, I mean, I would consider my journey with my Armenian identity has kind of been like the Wanderers, like just kind of learning as I go. So, I mean, my name Tahmizian is from my father's father, so that's my Armenian linkage. So my dad, his father is Armenian, his mother is Yugoslavian, like modern day Slovenia. So, and their family, the Armenian family left Armenia to go to Egypt, and then my dad grew up in Egypt, and then they moved from Egypt to Canada. So yeah, that's been like a wandering through the globe to like find a place of peace.
Oh, we got Daniel frozen. No. Naira.
Sorry, am I still here?
Yes, you are
Sorry
still
about that.
here.
Yeah, sorry
Am
about that.
I still here? I was
Yeah,
wondering.
you're frozen before, but
Okay, so you were the one that was frozen. So, okay, so we'll go back to
sure.
the wondrous question of your family. So what we got is that your family migrated eventually from Egypt to Canada.
Yeah, and then on my mother's side, it's a bit more grounded, like a Canadian British, and so
Mhm.
growing up, I like my connection to my Armenian identity. It grew as I got older. So, as a young kid, and so yeah, as a young kid, I just knew my dad grew up in Egypt, so I thought I thought I had like Egyptian heritage,
Yeah.
and um, and so my Armenian grandparents were no longer with us when I was once by the time I was born. So the Armenian, I think it wasn't it was there, like my dad and his sisters and my aunt, the group, my great aunt, they would speak Armenian at family gatherings, so the language was there, and we had little Armenian traditions and stuff, but it wasn't, I wouldn't call it like a daily, it wasn't like a daily influence on me. I grew up thinking I was like Egyptian, and then as you
Mhm.
get older and you started thinking a bit deeper, then I thought, oh wait, no, like they went through, like the family went through Egypt to get to Canada. And I was like, okay, so, and then I had to shift that thinking and be like, okay, I was connected to like the Egyptian, what I thought was Egyptian heritage. And I was like, it was Armenian heritage. And then I started learning more and more about Armenian heritage and connecting more and more to it. As I learned like the stories and the history, it just spoke to me in a way that just felt like it was, yeah, it's, I mean, obviously it's important to know like where you come from and where your ancestors are from and what they've been through. But that story seemed to connect with me, uh, and so it's been yeah, and like it's been just an ongoing journey. And so I think that itself has informed like my work. I think just like not really feeling connected to one particular group. Like I don't speak the language.
Mhm.
Um, and I didn't grow up with connection to Armenian community, like with my own little family unit. It's like it's there. Um, there, like my dad lost both his parents very young, and so I think not having that older generation in my life was a big loss. And I think because they moved to Canada, I think there was quite an effort to assimilate into the Canadian culture, and so it's been an interesting journey of like me personally trying to reconnect with it. And so I've always felt, I feel very connected to the name. I think it's it's an interesting thing because I have cousins who have the same amount of Armenian heritage, but their mother took their father's name, and so they have more anglicized names. And I'm
Mhm.
always like, so they don't get, almost, I wouldn't say daily, but it's Armenian last names. I think people really enjoy saying them or looking at them, and people, I love seeing if they're like, oh, are you Armenian? I saw the IAN, and so
Mhm.
in a very small way, it's like a part of my life, just because it's like my name is imprinted on me, and it's how the world sees me. And
Yeah.
so it does get brought up quite a bit, but I always have to say, well, or somebody starts speaking Armenian to me, and I'm like, well, I don't speak the
Mm.
language, unfortunately. So it's been like a long journey of like trying to
Yeah.
reconnect with it, and
Yeah.
so and never feeling quite one. Like I don't feel Canadian, I don't feel British, I don't feel Yugoslavian, I don't
Yeah.
feel like it's. I just feel like a mixture of all these things,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
so I do kind of feel like I'm wandering through. So I think it was more like when I came down to write this film and make it, I don't think it was like forefront on my mind, but it's
Mhm.
definitely in there. And just like how I think I approach the world and my work is, um, yeah, I don't feel connected to like one particular group or place or anything. I do feel this untethered um, life where I can kind of move around and connect with like kind of any
Yeah.
group, like just because I don't feel this like solid connection. But I will say this, I think what ended up happening with this film was like I got into some Armenian film festivals like ARPA and Pomegranate, and it actually like I got to connect with Armenian filmmakers and go to these festivals and like spend a weekend watching Armenian film, and then so like actually the byproduct of this film, I felt like I actually got like quite a, and now this
Yeah.
that it's like helping me like really like connect with my Armenian heritage in a very significant way. Which so I if maybe if it wasn't there before, it's actually like
Yeah,
doing a lot.
it's interesting, you know, how people from the outside see it, and how you are seeing it yourself. Because I felt like, oh, there must be a connection, right? And I mean, obviously there is a connection, but it's interesting how I immediately sort of you know, got attracted by this idea of diaspora, wandering, and so on. So it's interesting how to hear your side of this story. So to wrap up things, what's next? What are you working on? Where are you going? Can we expect more shorts?
Yeah, so yeah, right now I'm in Thunder Bay. I'm like working on a documentary series about Thunder Bay, and it's about the indigenous population here, so I've been working mostly in documentary the last maybe 2 3 years. I kind of stumbled my way into it, and
Yeah,
it's something I've always loved watching. I love watching documentaries, and I used to work for like a documentary film festival and theater and everything. And now I'm like there making them, and you know, in various aspects, like as a camera operator or director of photography or on the crew, and so I'm actually just like loving this journey that I'm on right now. That's I'm trying to continue the going with the flow and seeing where my passions and are taking me, and so I've been like pretty much just like solidly working in documentary for the last 2 3 years since this film came out, and I'm gonna follow this path. Like I definitely am on this journey that I love. But I do. So you know, I have very like there's this project, and then there's a TV series, doc series I work on for Vice called Dark Side of the Ring, which is
Mhm.
about professional wrestling. And so I'm hoping that continues. We just finished the third season that's airing now on it's on Vice or Hulu, I think, in the States. And we're hoping for fourth season, and that would hopefully start in the fall, and I'd go back on the road for that, which I love working on that show, and it's really interesting. But I do like actually right before the pandemic, I did hit. I had written a short that would be, I mean, not a sequel or anything, but it's like Steve Bollianto, who's the actor in this, who is like incredible. I think he's just like
Yeah,
he inspires me in so many ways. I think he's such an incredible like character actor. I want to have him in anything. So I have a short written that we were like gearing up to make kind of in the summer of 2019 or 2020. So that got put on the back burner, and I honestly haven't even like looked at it since then. It felt like
yeah,
I remember for so long it felt like I don't even know if anything I had written before this, does it even like relate, does even
yeah,
you know, who does it even matter anymore.
yeah, yeah,
So I'm going to like relook at that again now that things are
yeah.
opening up again, and I would, yeah, I honestly haven't even read it since I like since 2020. So I definitely want to read it again and see where it's at and see if it still makes sense
Yeah.
with the new world.
Mhm.
Because I really would love to work with Steve again and
Yeah,
continue on, because I do, as much as I am like in this
yeah,
documentary world, there is still that part of me that wants to still make um, these like little pieces like this, because especially since it can connect me to so many things.
yeah.
Yeah,
I'm
so in that
excited.
one,
Yeah, I'm excited that you know that you know are continuing to do this kind of work, even though your journey is taking you into the dark side of the ring world. and yeah, I would love to know more about the project. And I can see yeah, 2020 sort of stopped us in our track, and so the relevance of the work that we do, and yeah, it puts new questions, I think, on the table. So it's interesting for me to hear that you wrote something, but now you're like wondering whether or not it will still be relevant. And I think that's
like
quite a sensitive way of walking the planet at this particular moment in time.
Yeah, I honestly have not read it in like over a year, so I'd be very interested and just to see where my brain was right before. And
yeah.
I mean, it's about like our connection to creating art, like that's kind of. But I'd be very interested to see it. It's like, oh, does this
but I would be interesting to see it come alive. So Daniel, thank you so much for spending this hour with us and sharing your wonderful work. And we're looking forward to seeing more.
I appreciate it. It always makes you feel good that somebody has seen what you've done and somebody can appreciate it. And I appreciate, like, I feel like you've connected with it in a way that I hope that people would. And for anybody watching, like, I know whatever you took away from it, if like it was not what I just said, like, my intention with this was always, I had my intention writing it and making it, but like, whatever you've taken away from it is like, it's what you took away, and don't discredit it in any way. It's your journey through it as well. So
that is beautiful. And I think on that note, we'll say goodbye to everyone, and keep wandering the world as we do. Thank you so much, everyone.
Yep. Thanks for coming by.
Thanks,
everybody.
Dan.